Silicon Valley Future Forum.
So my name is Masoud Nikravesh. I've been at UC Berkeley for almost 25 years, and the last 5 years I've been in the startups, and right now the CEO and Chief Data Science Officer at DeepPhenome, which we are focusing on solving the cancer and precision medicine.
Yeah, my name is Jisheng Wang, and I'm currently the Senior Director of Data Science in Aruba. And I actually joined Aruba actually is a HPE company. I joined Aruba through the Neura acquisition early this year, where I was the chief scientist for all of the analytics and the big data work there.
Hello, my name is Wang. I'm from China Analysys, while I take care of the business here in the States.
Hi, my name is Sudhir, and I'm CTO of a company. We just closed Series A. We raised $7 million. I'm building a product, and I do have that as my daytime job. And in the evening, I teach at Santa Clara University.
Hi, my name is Kaycee. I am the President and Chief Operating Officer for Waterline Data. We work mainly with Fortune 500 and Fortune 2000 companies, helping them figure out their big data problem, but also just what data do they have, where is it, who has access to it, and lastly, can you use the data to help generate positive output for your business, or what is the risk to not knowing what data you have? So those are the challenges that we work with every day with companies.
So Kaycee, how long have you been working with Fortune 500s?
Pretty much all my career.
Okay,
yeah.
So you've seen this whole hype cycle transpire over the
Yes.
last decade or so. Talk to me about what promises these Fortune 500 companies made, or what you would have advised them 5 years ago in big data, and how much are we actually seeing on the ground being accomplished?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I think with any new technology, there's always a cycle where you go through the difference between technology and product. And a lot of folks, especially here in Silicon Valley, we're all innovators. We sometimes don't really know where that line is drawn. So I think with big data, a lot of people were drawn to the promise of big data, but it was a technology. Hadoop was really hard to implement, really hard to manage, and itself was a big scalable mess of iron. You couldn't really get intelligence out of it without 6 or 7 different solutions which you had to integrate together. Fast forward a few years though, I think now people have figured out how to conquer that difficulty. You've got great platforms like AWS and Microsoft Azure, ADLS, where that is no longer the difficult part. So generating, harnessing, collecting, and managing data is no longer difficult. That has been solved. Now the hard part is figuring out where the data is, because I think it was James who was talking earlier, you've got these moats or these silos of data everywhere, right? We talk to these Fortune 2000 companies, some of them have data infrastructure from 40 years ago. Oracle doesn't talk to SQL, doesn't talk to Teradata, doesn't talk to now your Hadoop cluster and now your Amazon cloud. How do you actually figure out where everything is, and how do you affect your business if you actually don't know what data you have or where it is? So that's one side, and I like to say there's a yin and yang of data, right? That's the happy side. Everyone likes to use data to affect business outcomes. The dark side is the risk, right? What if you have data that should be deleted? And if it's not, you can get subpoenaed. What if you have data that puts you at risk? What if you have data where you have some compliance regulations, like GDPR coming out of Europe, which means at any time, if anyone asks you, please forget me, you have to be able to find every record of that individual to forget. And if you can't do that, you could be subject to huge fines, up to 4% of your global revenue. So I think now we've reached that stage where people have reached the maturity of understanding what they need to do. Now the challenge comes with, I have so many different piecemeal technologies, my data is scattered and fractured everywhere. In fact, we hear the term dark data so much. There is more dark data than there's actual data you can find. A customer of ours, which is in a semiconductor chip company in Santa Clara, I won't say the name, you can figure it out. They say they can probably only, really find and trust and use about 15% of their data. And they're probably on the better side. They're probably one of the more sophisticated companies out there. Most folks, once you get them to admit, that number is probably closer to 5%, which is pretty scary.
So for those of you up here that have startups that are selling to these Fortune 500 companies and enterprises, how do you bridge that gap of selling something that is for an enterprise that's at this maturity level of adopting best practices in big data and machine learning, data preparation, extraction, so on and so forth, when they might not actually be at that point? I'll let you guys ruminate on that for a second.
Well, as long as the maturity that you said, that are they ready or not ready, so of course they are not ready, because if they were ready, they already had it inside, right? So that's the first answer to you, that a lot of the companies, maybe they are not ready, just they have internal, they look in for a period of the time, but they weren't ready to just adapt themselves. But I think that's not the issue. The issue is when a big Fortune 500 making a decision for something, is making a decision because they're investing billions of the dollars for the next 5, 10 years. And then suddenly you come and try to disrupt that. It's not about that they are not ready for the technology. They are not ready to just give up billions of the dollars that is already planned for the next 5, 10 years, to just abandon it and you'll come with something new. So they have to see the value, how much the value you're actually bringing to the table. And they come up and it's a trade-off. Okay, when is now that trade-off give them to the benefit that they can actually move forward? I think that's it.
I'm gonna sort of push on this. I'm gonna see where this conversation goes, make it interesting. So when I talk to founders and Fortune 500 companies, we could pick any example out of a hat. It's not. Let's just take IBM Watson for example.
Right.
The feedback that I most often hear is not that the capabilities of Watson, are in some way deficient, or that whatever deep learning ideal GPU use case, isn't satisfactory for most enterprises. Typically, what I hear is we couldn't get our data in line to work with Watson, or we couldn't get our data in line to work with insert service. And so the question becomes, even if there remains stratification across the industry of the capabilities of these various machine learning tools, if the data is not there, if the data is not ready, if the data is all over the place, it's not prepped for these models, nobody's really going anywhere. So when I talk about the maturity of these Fortune 500 companies, I absolutely think, you're 100% right, that there's definitely this element of long-term forecasting and convincing folks to uproot strategies that were made 5, 6, 7 years ago. But for the Fortune 500 companies that aren't ready for a lot of these new machine learning tools that are coming down the pipeline, what can the startup community do? What can venture capitalists do? What can the rest of the ecosystem do to kick this forward? Because it feels like it's been 5 or so years now that we've been having these conversations, and there still remains this pretty large delta between folks who are adopting best practices, are looking to the EU and data governance and data sovereignty and so on and so forth, and then there's this class of folks that aren't. So
I wanted to actually clarify, because actually you're right. When I said that they are not ready or just investment in a sense, that was for that reason. Because if you look at it, they look at architecture of their data. I'll give you a very simple example of today, everybody talking about blockchain, for example.
Sure.
I'm looking at the Kaiser Permanente. They have their data and they spend billions of the dollar to come up with these type of the databases so they can put all their data there. And you come up with a nice fancy blockchain. So the blockchain is going to disrupt everything that they're going to invest, because the type of the data they want and the type of the interaction that they want to do is not the way is actually that the new technology comes. So it's going to disrupt in every level, not only on the investment that they do, but the architecture that they do, the infrastructure that they have, so everything. So that's where it's actually the bottleneck is. Some company, they see opportunity internally, the big Fortune 500 or something like that. Either they see the startup is really mature enough, buy it, and they build a business out of that. Watson is one thing that they internally actually created an example of that, but it's just not that they bought something. But the Google example, that they bought so many companies around that type of things. I think maybe I give you a better example of what things goes. Because you talk about the Amazon, and everybody talking about Amazon, which is almost at 30% share of the thing. Where is the Amazon came from? When you look at it, Amazon came out of the Alexa. Alexa was 1998. Actually, the founder of the Alexa, was my speaker in 1998. He came actually in his lecture, he says, $1, and just actually the title of lecture was $1, one CPU and everything else. This is 1998, right? How long it took actually to the Amazon to become Amazon? It's pretty much like in 1999, they bought the Alexa. In 2007, they actually become a partner, a very big part of the Amazon. But today, you see that they actually getting the whole market. So because on that time, Amazon didn't have anything, right? They see a company, they see an opportunity, they could actually go right away because there wasn't any investment on that field. But if you go somewhere else that they already invested, like for instance, as an example I said, the Kaiser Permanente, that they spend billions of the dollar to build this data structure for all their patient data, and you go right away and say, okay, I want a blockchain, says, what is it to me?
Yeah. So I have a slightly different perspective. I'm not saying I disagree, but I think whenever you introduce new technologies out in the market, it's a classic product management problem, right? You have to understand the friction of adoption, right? And with big data and a lot of new technologies, we all just assume because it's so cool and it does something so well that naturally everyone's going to drop what they have and adopt. But data has gravity, right? There is a cost to actually moving and migrating data, shifting platforms. It's expensive. You talk to any Fortune 2000 company, and they'll tell you it costs 7 times more to implement a technology than to actually buy the technology, right? So where a lot of startups and new technologies fail is they fail to take into account that disruption to the business in doing that migration. Where they succeed is they come up with a migration path, or they focus on a use case that's not a huge departure from what currently exists. So an example of big data, one of the things that we struggle with for the last 10 years is we keep trying to sell customers on how fast and how scalable it is. Look, I can run this query, these massive petabytes in 2 seconds. And they fail to address why do I need it, right? What is it about my business? I'm an insurance company, I'm a bank. Why do I need these queries done in 2 seconds? When it's a batch job, I'm happy to let it run overnight in 18 hours.
So
and I'm fine.
I'll just add to that is that, I always look for money. So this is my 5th startup. My number 1 goal is that how they're going to pay, why they're going to pay for it. So whenever I built a new company, new startup, my goal is not I'm going to use Kafka or I'm going to use Spark ML or Flink or anything. I can hire any type of people. There are a lot of experts sitting. There's a lot of technology sitting. I can get people from all over the world. But my bigger goal is that if I come to you as I'm going to sell it to you, why are you going to buy for it? Do you really have a problem? Or this is something sexy in the market? I have ML, I have artificial intelligence. Do you really have a problem? That is my number 1 goal when I start a company is that why will they pay for it and how much can I get away with?
And how screwed are they, for lack of a better word, if they need to cut something from their budget? Is it going to be you or something else?
So yeah, my spouse always says that people pay only if they have pain. Nobody will pay you money. Unless they have pain, they will pay you. Only then they will pay you.
So you come from both sides of this, obviously the startup world and also teaching in academia. How often do you get exposure to executives and folks on the professional side of things, or are you more students?
Sure. So I teach grad class, that means master's class. My students are coming from Yahoo and Facebooks of the world. They are not kids. They are like already working professionals. So the fun part is that whenever they come to class, they come with a problem, right?
What are some perhaps bad assumptions that you have to sort of kick out of these folks, particularly if they have an interest in pursuing relationships with Fortune 500 companies, or really anything that's out of their comfort zone in Facebook, Yahoo, Google?
So people imagine there is some magic everywhere, this machine learning. So one of the assumptions is that when I'm going to come in this pipeline, so for those folks who don't know what the pipeline is, it's pretty simple that you are bringing bunch of data from sensors, you're bringing data from social or logs or Salesforce, whatever. The data on the left-hand side is coming in. You're going to massage, you're going to put this in a box, and then you're going to run some bunch of algorithms. You're going to put something in Elasticsearch, everything is clean. On the right-hand side, you're going to bring something like a Tableau or Click or Domo or then your mobile device. The whole pipeline is there. When people come in, they think that this is piece of cake. So this is, easy. I'm just going to put this data here. I'm just going to run some ML, very standard algorithm, Spark. Okay, we're going to download that. And the whole thing is so painful. It takes typically like 14 months for people like even with my kind of like 4th company doing the same thing. People assume a lot of things. Data problems are still there. 80% of the stuff is still boring and painful. That means you're going to go to this customer, he's going to have this 6 silos of data, and he's not going to have data dictionary, there's no ERD diagram, nothing is there. So assume worst of the worst when you are building a platform. So problems are still there. I mean, we're struggling on the same thing. Data is still dirty. It's so dirty that a lot of things are missing. You got to fix a lot of data before you actually, the sexy part is that which algorithm, and this nice looking data scientist comes in, she basically says, this is the algorithm we're going to use, and this is what we're going to display. That's the most sexy part, which comes at the tail end.
That assumes you already know where your
Yeah,
data
and
is.
that comes in the tail end. That's the funny part. But again, to those people who are entrepreneurs or students who are trying to get into this game, it's still pretty interesting game. We are still at the top of the tip book. There's so much can be done. I mean, totally optimistic about the game, you know. I mean, booking a flight. I have a friend, he's building a chatbot for vacation package. Hey, me and my wife, we want to go to Thailand. We want a convertible car, and I want a boat. And this whole damn sentence you can speak. And then this bot will come back and saying, I got 3 properties for you and a car ready booked for you. You know, there's tons of opportunities there, you know.
I see you smiling almost as if you have personal experience to pull from on this. So
Yeah, very interesting discussion. Well, when we're talking about the 500 something, we're talking about their data. But from our perspective of view, we think that the data itself is not that important. We think most important is the user or customer behind the data. Well, whatever the data you have is to try to describe your customer or the behavior or what they will do in the future. That's more important to.
It's what you do with the data.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what we do in China. We collect all the end user behavior data and make analysis on that. And now we're trying to get a better methodology to make such analysis. Well, it's a tough work. Well, but we do make some progress, and we just announced together with Deloitte yesterday. We are going to provide the digital user asset auditing service for companies, for
We
enterprises.
need to figure out how to make money.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
do you work with clients both in the United States and in China?
Sure.
Well, I'm assuming at least you have conversations with folks in both ecosystems. Do you notice any difference at all in maturity or the way that these Fortune 500 companies think about big data problems, machine learning problems? Because even, I mean, I just got back from New York a couple weeks ago, and even having conversations with startups in New York versus the Valley, I feel like there's a pretty strong ideological divide in how startups pitch their AI companies to VCs. I talk to VCs there, and folks look at me crazy as if you could actually pitch a deck to a venture capitalist and have technology as the second slide. But I'm curious if in your experience.
Oh, well, I don't want to talk about the technical side because I'm not a technology specialist myself. Well, 20 years ago I was, but not now. Well, basically, let's try to discuss that in the common sense or business-wise. Well, when we talk about 500 or startup, well, what we look at is the project or the technology or the product itself. How does it make money for the company? Well, let's talking about, when we're talking about the 500, the giants, they have a lot of customer base. They have a very wide portfolio, product portfolio, technology in hand, but so they face difficulties when they try to move into the new track. I say that's typically a path dependent.
So Kai, I'm going to give you last words here, and they're going to be I'm going to put all the weight on your shoulders for this last question. So if we were to put together like I feel like we've already done Big Data 2.0, like maybe back in 2014. So maybe Big Data 3.0, 3.5, sort of best practices for for folks in the ecosystem when they're looking at these sorts of problems, particularly in the context of an age where deep learning, AI, probabilistic programs, so on and so forth, are such big topics. What does that look like?
Well, in our opinion, in China, it's a premature stage for the big data, and it's becoming mature soon. And also, as our forecast, we will see that in no more than 10 years, maybe every company will be a big data company. So in that sense, there will be no more big data company, in fact.
That's good.
Do you have anything that you want to add to?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
I'll give
certainly
him- I'll
I
give him-
want
I'll give him-
to
yeah,
just confirm, I agree with most of what we just discussed here. I also want to share some of the experience we had because I come from a startup, which it's like only 3-year-old startup, got acquired by Aruba HP early this year. So it's very interesting, actually, Kaycee is one of our customers. Because what you just said reminds me of the story, a couple months of the time, how we went through the POC there. It's a big data. First, a quick introduction of the product that we built. It's an enterprise security product. So the idea is, these days you probably hear so many of the enterprise breach, like enterprise consumer want to acquire, almost every day there's a headline of this. So we actually take a different approach. We assume some of the devices or users in the enterprise has been compromised. So what we do is we actually look at the behavior change of the users in the enterprise, say, what do you do every day? Like if suddenly one day you are doing something which looks different than what your job role or something, maybe you are compromised, or like one typical story we heard is like this is more like the Snowden case. People leaving the company stealing a lot of the data. So the way we solve the problem, we actually use it's purely like big data and machine learning solution. Look at the behavior vectors of each device and the user across the company. Like compare their today's behavior with their history behavior, with their peers' behavior to see what can be the potential threat inside the enterprise. So so the way we build a solution is to collect tons of different behavior data, how you access the internal network, how you access the cloud application, how you access the authentication to a server, all of this. So it's a big data problem. We collect first come back to that the dirty data part. Yeah, dealing with different kind of the variety of the different kind of data is actually the pain. I remember the story because I was involved deeply into that POC. It's about like 2 months. They have a giant data pool, has tons of the data collected already in actually Splunk and other systems. The first thing we did is actually, we expect the data to be in certain format, certain fields, but you always see the surprise. You can understand it's exactly 80% of time you spend just doing this data crunching, cleaning up to get data in the expected format. Right. But one thing I want to put here is, like your question, how to really push this forward for this like Fortune, 100 or 500. My feeling is still you have to, both big data and machine learning, even deep learning, these are just the tools. You have to solve a practical problem. Yep. At the end, after this long process, Kaycee become our customer, and I assume it's a happy customer now. It's just still we solve a practical problem in that enterprise. They collect tons, actually petabytes of data there, but they are still threatened by this kind of malicious insider. Someone is going to steal your data, both the attackers from outside or these malicious employees. The CISO, the people there are threatened by that every day. They don't want to become the headline. So as long as after that painful process, as long as we prove, they actually did some pen test called a penetration test. So the idea is like they try to mimic some people, try to attack the system, steal data, exfiltrate data. They actually did that kind of pen test. And we are one of the few solutions who actually caught after all of this like data pipeline, heavy work. We showed the value. And this, I feel, this can, at the end for this, top Fortune 100, 500 companies, if you want to, so they have strong initiative to move the technology forward.
but you have to show the value of your solution or of your technology.
I think that's the common theme, right?
Yeah.
No matter if it's big data, machine learning, or AI, whatever new technologies are being introduced, you have to solve a pain point. Does someone make money?
And
Do
make
they
a lot
save
of money.
Sure.
That's, that's the
Money
common
For a
theme.
panel with no VCs on it, this is sure sounded
And
quite
make
like
a lot
it.
of
We've spent a lot of time with them.
Well, let me
So-
actually add one.
Sure, quickly,
just
yes.
a small comment here. You know, as a person that I actually did my PhD in late 80s on a deep learning, per se. If you go back on that time, we were selling the technology rather than the solution. Today, this is a tool. So it means that we went a long way from selling the science that everybody wants to have that science because of the flagship and the fantasy world or type of the things. I remember my postdoc, he was just running one thing on the Department of Energy supercomputer that nobody has access to it. That time it was luxury. Today is a tool. That's why the mentality has changed. So it's just not always been like that. So every science has a cycle that is first is a luxury. Everybody wants it because of the luxury flagship. I want to be the pioneer. I want to be the frontier to get to become a tool. Today, AI, as I said, I'm so glad to see it becomes just a tool. And then you look at the business part of it.
Of course.
Silicon Valley Future Forum.